In this video, I am going to talk about a very specific genre of dramas in Chinese dramaland, Xian Xia drama, and its super unfortunate and sad current status. Hi, you're watching Avenue X, where a junkie on good storytelling shares their thoughts, knowledge, and occasional weird ideas on stories and how they're told. I have been wanting to make this video for a long time, and it's already November that I found I had a bit time not making videos focused on a specific drama, but on a whole category of dramas. Starting from day one viewers, I know there are quite a few of you still hanging around. You know that this channel started because of 2017, the airing of 10 Miles of Peach Blossoms. I am going to break this down into 3 different sections. First part, I am going to talk about the history of Xian Xia dramas in China, how it got to today. I'm just going to talk about from when I have memories. The second part is going to be a little bit introduction to my observation or my opinion on the essential difference between Western fantasy and Chinese fantasy and why the current Chinese fantasy is sitting in a really awkward place. The third part is going to be talking about pretty much from 2017 onwards to this point, why this genre, in my opinion, has declined so much. Almost nobody expect high-quality drama comes out of this genre anymore. This is gonna be a rather long video. I will have the time code in the timeline. If you don't want to sit through the whole thing, you can pick where you want to go. Now, let's first start with history. Xian Xia. Xian means fairy or god or deity, depending on how you translate it, in the mostly Christian culture West. Really, there isn't 100% equivalent to that, because Xian represents a type of existence that's above humans, that have superpowers that can come from different origins other than being human. So there could be an animal who has cultivated for thousands of years, and Xian Xia really comes from the literature and also later visual adaptations of that literature tradition, wuxia. Wuxia, I believe if you're watching my video, you know what wuxia is. That's about human characters who have near to superhuman abilities, but still are confined to our human realm, human history, and human stories. So Xian Xia, you can say it is an upgraded with supernatural power characters story as a extended branch of the tradition of wuxia. As early as back in the 80s, China did have a very well-known television series that was long influential till today, 西游记 Journey to the West. But that's based on a classic Chinese novel, the Monkey King story. It is more like an adaptation of a literature piece that's based on mythology. But you can already start to see a little bit of how, in the television land, gods, supernatural beings, xian, are represented. In my memory, the earliest thing that has a little bit relevance to this genre is 新百娘子传奇, produced in Taiwan back in 1992. For over 2 decades, I would call this as the most popular drama in Chinese-speaking regions in the world, and it often gets replayed by different television stations during summer holidays over and over and over. This is based on a Chinese folk story about the white snake paying back the debt of the snake being saved when it was little by a person, and thousands of years later when she cultivated to the point she can become xian. But right before that, she has to repay the debt before she can move on, so she goes to the human world and then finds this reincarnation person and then married him. This drama, led by Zhao Yazhi, Yetong, Chen Meiqi, is almost the shared collective subconscious these days now in China. Due to its wide influence, it's almost everybody knows characters, actors, actresses, even the music from it. Still though, I wouldn't call 新白娘子传奇 a current 仙侠 drama. It's still far from it. But in many ways, it is the beginning of a visual production, and in many of its aspects that will heavily influence every other dramas that touches on gods, fairies, demons, beings who are beyond human realm and having supernatural powers. All those works that came after have something to do with this drama establishing its aesthetics, how the story is told, how characters are written, but not fully taken its shape yet. Because xia, this word in Chinese, the closest Western version you have is kind of Robin Hood, a lonely warrior who stands for justice. And The White Snake has very little element of that. It mostly is still focused on the romantic relationship between the leading couple, about karma and paying the debt and all that. Then, close to the turn of the century, we've had a production that's done in Singapore that I would call getting closer to the current genre, which is 东游记. Literally means journey to the east, so not the traditional journey to the west novel adaptation story, but it is still based on a Chinese mythology, so it still hasn't jumped out of the tradition of adapting a story from folklore and then make it current to its time. Journey to the East is based on the lore of the 8 deities, 八仙, which, as the name suggests, is made up by 8 different characters. Before they became a deity, they were literally from all walks of life, different gender, different age group, different birth ranks and whatever, and it makes up this quite incredible ensemble of every deities is vastly different from each other, but somehow they come together and form this group. And this drama produced in Singapore took that and brought it to 1998's audiences with this fresh breath of air. Story-wise, acting-wise, styling, beautiful. Even today, when you look at it, it's still great. And a lot of interesting storylines. This is really an ensemble drama where each of those 8 deities get their own plotline. Some of them have really difficult struggles. Some of them have questionable behaviors. They're not always just the best gods imaginable. Obviously, you cannot run away from romantic elements of it. But one of the great things about this drama is there is this camaraderie between 2 gods, Lü Dongbing and He Xiangu. And because they're both good-looking, they're so perfect in the way they're set up, they look like the ideal couple that you'd be writing as a couple for any dramas. But one of the reasons that I highly appreciate 东游记 is they come together for their greater ideals as gods with their responsibilities. It doesn't need to be built upon romantic love. The most ironic thing is, back then in 1998 when I watched that drama, I never found it weird or unusual or refreshing or progressive. I just accepted it. Over 20 years later, today, when you look at Fantasy Dramaland, you just almost don't see this type of relationship anymore. If anybody writes me a really convincing relationship between a god and a goddess like that, I've been clapping. And isn't that ironic? History just doesn't progress in a linear fashion. We are already at the turn of the century, but still we are not yet entering the fully developed original version of a current Xian Xia drama in Chinese Dramaland. You already know what I'm gonna talk about. That's the 仙剑奇侠传 series. This started today's Xian Xia drama, and it wasn't something that came from a mythology, folklore, previous existing even opera type of material. It comes from a game that got really popular in the 90s. In the early 2000s, it got adapted into a television series. The drama was led by Hu Ge, Liu Yifei, An Yixuan, Liu Pingyan, Peng Yu. Yeah, why am I laughing? Maybe it's because of Di Lu Xiang that is in Chinese cinema right now. Everything that came after is the continuously updated software version of that original series. A couple of years later, they made 仙剑奇侠传3, the 3rd one. Not because there's a second one, but because it's based on the 3rd game of this IP. We still have Hu Ge as the leading actor, but now we have Liu Shishi and Yang Mi as the leading actresses. Also, Tang Yan, also Huo Jianhua. Started a couple of very well-known actor and actresses CPs that are still active in people's imagination today, such as Hu Huo and Shi Mi. But that is a totally different story. Due to their super success, many other future dramas started to happen, and often they come from games. Not long after that, internet literature will take the place of game to become the original text where such dramas are based on. Into the 2010s, there's another drama that's also very successful moving forward on the line of 仙侠 drama, which is 古剑奇谭. You don't even need to be that old watching my videos to know about that drama if you care about Chinese Dramaland. It is also based on a game. That was the year 2014. Turning over into 2015, we started the era of web novel adaptation into fantasy drama, and who could argue the super success back then of 花千骨, Journey of the Flower, led by Huo Jianhua and Zhao Liying. I trust all my audiences are all too familiar with this IP, its episodes, its character setup, their styling, everything, music. Who doesn't know? If you're watching this video, you definitely know Hua Qiangu. And I'd say the future investment into this genre and many dramas that got made afterwards mostly happened because people saw just how popular Hua Qiangu was and how much money there is for them to make. From that point onwards, adapting popular fantasy IP web novel started its crazy rush. And the most successful one after that would be the 2017 Tumblr of Peach Blossoms, the one that started Avenue X, the channel. After Tumblr, within this genre, there are a couple of still rather successful dramas, but that was only to compare them with similar genre drama that came out in the same year. Their performance in terms of popularity still cannot compare to the super successful Journey of the Flower or Tumblr of Peach Blossoms, such as Ashes of Love, 香蜜沉沉烬如霜, or last year's 琉璃 Love and Redemption. In between those successful ones, there were quite a lot dramas in this genre that really didn't go very far. Unfortunately, one of them is Love and Destiny, which I love very much, but I have to admit, when it was airing, it pretty much didn't get noticed. So now we're in 2021, and there are many projects, fantasy drama based on IP, that are ongoing, that are being made, and that is the brief recap of a history of Chinese Xian Xia drama up to this point. Now let's move on to the second part of this video. As I've said in the first part, Xian Xia drama is an extension of the tradition of wuxia drama. Its Xian part mostly comes from the tradition of Chinese mythology, but it is also influenced by Western fantasies. There was actually another genre of drama that is not Chinese Xian Xia, but Chinese Xuanhuan, which will literally mean fantasy, mostly influenced by Western fantasy. For example, the Tribes and Empires series of books and its world setup, its characters, that has a strong vibe of the world building and different clans and based on their different race type of thing that you see in Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. So that's different genre of drama. I wouldn't call them the same thing as Xian Xia. Xian Xia is an even narrower one that has to have those elements of mythology, the gods, the fairies, wuxia, fighting element upgraded with superpowers and magic, and then still it will contain a little bit of the Western fantasy thing that I think is one of the reasons why the current Xian Xia dramas have a lot of very conflicting nature at the foundation of the storytelling. Today, if you go and watch a drama that aired in 2021 of fantasy, for example, ancient love poetry, immediately you get introduced to this world where different categories of beings are either enemies or friends or collaborating or far apart based on their race and species. Naturally, they get separated. And nobody even questions about that. It just starts with this concept of if you belong to a different race from others, then you naturally belong to different categories of beings. And your ranking in terms of your social status in the gods realm or your supernatural powers is pretty much based on what you are. For example, Tumblr of Peach Blossoms, our female lead character is a night-tailed fox. Her mother is, her father is, her brother is, and they live in this particular place, the Blue Hills. And that's where they stay, okay? They don't go anywhere else, and they just recognize everybody within their group as us. And then the Heavenly Emperor and his race belong to a totally different clan. And whether we're close to each other or not, whether we're friends or enemy, totally depends on, at this point, what I want from you and what you want from me. And that idea is actually very foreign to Chinese mythology, which at least Xian Xia drama claims they're based on. For example, the idea of night-tailed fox is from Chinese traditional mythology. Yet, the power structure, right, looks very much like Lord of the Rings setup, where hobbits, humans, elves, different races just naturally divide because they belong to different races. But if you look at Chinese traditional mythology, you'll realize whether you came from a human, you came from a fox, you came from a bird, a snake, does not matter that much in terms of whether you get a position and become a god. A lot of the Chinese mythology stories about gods come from the tradition of Chinese civil exam system, where a commoner, through their own work, going through the exams, can jump their ranks and become an official. And that didn't really exist in other countries, in the West for sure, not really in its history. So when you look at Chinese traditional mythology, you see a lot of gods come from different backgrounds. When they become gods, which we translate as Shen, whereas deity often gets translated as Xian, the only difference between them really is if you get an official position from the heavenly court. It has nothing to do with whether you're powerful as a supernatural being. So you might be actually really, really powerful. For example, the Monkey King. He's a monkey, but a lot of gods are just unable to fight him off. But he's not recognized as a god because he never got an official ranking in that heavenly power structure. So in Chinese mythology, you can say the particular individual's power, their positions, and what they stand for and stand against mostly do not come from their race. It often just comes from what kind of political aspirations they have. There is this natural incompatibility between the traditional Chinese mythology's system with the Western fantasy. One is based on the different official ranking positions you get in this power structure. The other mostly comes from race and species. So, current Xian Xia drama takes the ranking system of a kind of Chinese mythology, but they also recognize we are enemies or friends just based on the difference between naturally who we are. I'm not saying it is that important that you have to be super analytical about where things come from, but I do think at some level subconsciously Chinese viewers just in their gut can feel there's a disjoint, misfitting of the core of those fantasy dramas to the tradition, to how Chinese people in our culture have viewed these things. And it surfaces into all kinds of rather ridiculous plot that people come up with, such as, for example, in ancient love poetry, you have the goddess who's supposed to be the strongest goddess of all, played by Zhou Dongyu, simply due to another race of tiger demons exist in the power structure of being down below. She did something to make a lot of goddess happy, collected their happiness sparks and sprinkled on those tigers, and suddenly those tigers are happy. There's not really any improvement of their supposedly terrible living conditions, but just because a higher being goddess by the nature of her birth, not through her hard work, not through her continuous effort to make herself better, which really is the thing that is unique about Chinese tradition, which is you can be a commoner, but you can climb to the top if you work at it. You see the conflict? It's weird that you have a Chinese story claimed to be based on coming from the tradition of mythology and Chinese wuxia and all that, yet at the core of it, it is based on the idea of by birth, you are either dignified or not. By birth, you're either powerful or not. Everything is based on who you are at the moment you were born. Don't know how many people consciously catches that and feel uncomfortable about it or feel it doesn't make sense. But it's everywhere in all kinds of fantasy dramas. So that will conclude my second point, which is through my observation, I do see this really weird mixture and disjoint feeling of the shell and the core are not really the same thing. And since I'm not getting a degree on this, so definitely not doing a lot of academic references or research into it, you might be a person who is doing a degree somewhere that is related to this topic. It totally could be a very interesting study topic. Finally, we're moving on to the third part, where I'm gonna talk about what are the problems of current Chinese Xian Xia drama. As visual adaptations, most of the Xian Xia drama these days fall into a kind of trap and they can't get out of. They just repeat themselves over and over again. It really gives you the feeling that the creators behind this type of dramas these days have given up putting any of their personal flares, putting any of their ambitions as storytellers, putting any of their daring spirit into the work. They just want to take what has been proven to be somehow successful previously and reproduce it, hoping something would stick, hoping something would explode again, hoping at least they can make even. And there are four main things that I see causes this tired feeling that I have watching this genre of dramas and often being ranted about by most of the reviewers. First, on the most superficial level, the uniformed and uninspired aesthetics. And I would point to 10 Miles of Peach Blossoms and its super success as the beginning of the current overinfestation of the preference on light colors. That is, on the characters also, on the interior designs, on the sets. The heavenly realms where God resides just seem to have to be white. Their clothes have to be white. Gray, as if any vibrant color is illegal in the god's existence. Similar hairstyle across the board. Top part, a little bit decoration of the hair, then the rest are all floating, whether it's male or female. And long before this type of Xian Xia drama existed in traditional Chinese mythology, in our traditional 戏曲, which is all types of local traditional opera, such as Beijing opera or 越剧 or 黄梅戏, all those, it has never been a thing to depict gods or goddess or any of those supernatural beings with this type of aesthetics. They look like they're going to a Western wedding with that kind of clothing, instead of coming from a wall painting, a mural, a historical statue of a goddess or any of that. And these days a lot of people complain already. Everywhere you can see on China's internet. Why can't we have goddesses who are dressed in beautiful jewelries, vibrant colors, crazy hairs? That's our tradition. And wouldn't that be much more interesting visually to look at than everybody looking ashy and pale and white? I bothered to dress up like this, although it's still not as let's say colorful as I'd like to be, and definitely not close to my ideals of crazily beautifully dressed goddesses. But the Xian Xia dramas today, they don't even want to bother to make their actresses look like this, because it does take quite a bit effort to put your hair up. I don't have a huge flower slap on the back of my head due to the fact nobody's watching. I'm looking at the camera like that and nobody else is here. I don't want to bother, but I could, and I'm just saying, it's more work, and they don't want to do it. And they think goddesses should be just looking like that. And why? Just because one drama succeeded at that, somehow everybody just think by default you should just keep doing it. It's laziness. It is people do not viewing their own work as a unique piece of work that should have their creativity invested in it. That's just the superficial level of things that makes me very unhappy, and clearly a lot of other viewers unhappy about the current status of Xian Xia drama. Then the second and third thing, I can combine them as one, which have a similar kind of problems but on different aspects. One is on the plot of the drama, one is on the characters, which is the oversimplification, tagging everything with a particular word and concept, and therefore reducing the complicated human nature and things into just one tag and just put it out there. For example, plot-wise, you have the weird fascination about lifetimes and reincarnation. Most of the time, 三生三世, right? 3 lifetimes. And then Liu Li pushed it to 10 lifetimes. Does it essentially serve your story's point? Do you need to have that in your particular narrative? Nobody really cares about that. They just put it in. Like a ready-made boxes of food these days you can order. They'll give you a recipe and everything ready. This much butter, this much beef, this much this, put them together, done. That particular lifetime plot is just one piece of the ready packed thing you just throw into the mix, and you hope something good can come out of it. An inorganic integration of a particular type of setup is just not gonna give you a story that is unique and interesting. So this is the reduction of complicated things into simple hashtags. And that also happens to characters, not just plot. For the characters, the most common thing that just happens in every Xian Xia drama, which when you think about it deeply, is very politically incorrect. That is, your birth already determines your morality, your beauty, your power. A lead has to have incredibly high and powerful birth, even when they are not aware of it For example, Ashes of Love. Our female lead character is the daughter of two very high-ranking gods, but she didn't know it. And somehow, just because she is naturally that, therefore, eventually, she will arrive at a place where she gets ranks and powers and everybody's respect and love. And also, your birth determines how pretty you are, how morally superior you are to the hateful second leads. On the surface, it's all those stories just trying to tell you that our lead characters arrived at their success or final happiness through their own effort and struggle, but it's actually not the case. It really was already determined at the moment they were born. Even when they started somewhere humble, well, it's just because they didn't know they are the swan within the group of ducks. And once they grow up, they will just unleash that power that has always been there. And you look at all the male leads and female leads, they pretty much are all like that. And the morally inferior, the bad ones, the ones who really do the horrible things and get what they deserve in the end, they all have lower birth. They all have lower positions. The moment they came off the production line, they have defects. And no matter how hard they try, how much they try to reach to the light, eventually they're gonna lose. And in the competition between them and the leading heroes, the heroes always win. So that is also a very weird situation in those dramas, a reduction of the complicated human stories into tags. And this is not even just that, this is a level of deeply ingrained discrimination. And that also goes against the type of really interesting, unique Chinese perspective, which is 王侯将相，宁有种乎? And this is something that is well known to every Chinese person. Regardless of your birth, you could be a peasant, you could be a beggar, but it's possible through your own hard work and effort to actualize your idealism, no matter what that is. Unfortunately, that kind of value system and that kind of belief in Chinese culture never gets represented in Xian Xia drama. Very, very weird and unfortunate and uncomfortable to watch, honestly. Then the last point, after I've said so many bad things about these Xian Xia dramas, one excuse, which is also its shortcomings that I can use to explain all those away, is nobody actually cared about their writing a fantasy story. They never really thought, even for a second, about, with the fantasy god deity kind of setups, what type of possibilities we have. They really just want to make harem power struggle stories, which take that and put it in a god's world. No matter how those characters in the drama claim they care about Changsheng, they care about all the living beings, they have this born with heavy fate that they have to sacrifice themselves for the world, whatever. No matter how many times they say it, the only thing they do in this drama is fall in love, fall out of love, trying to find where my lover has gone, losing my love, die and come back again and fall into love with that guy's reincarnation. And everything every other characters do in this drama, there's only one end goal, is to prove to the leading female and leading male character, you two are destined for each other. And the absolute ultimate goal of our storytelling is put you two together. What are the Changsheng? What are the existence and beings and fate of the universe? They're just excuses to make our drama bigger so that we don't have to finish it in 20 episodes. We can finish it in 60 episodes so that we can sell it for more money. And we jam in a couple of subplot of irrelevant other couples to take up the screen time, again sell it for more money. Use that as tools to put those two lead together. It's like kiss. At the core of it is the regressive, the worst harem drama story that only cares about and not worth talking about romantic relationship of two boring and irresponsible gods. And you wonder why people do not appreciate this type of storytelling. Whatever is your religious belief or your belief of the spiritual realm, at least we all believe the higher beings than humans would have first definitely more power, but then more wisdom. And they would understand the complicated things of universe much better than we do. They have accesses to things that three-dimensional humans just can't reach. You'd think when they got to that position, the things that make human go crazy, whether it's power, money, sex, all that, would have become irrelevant, probably. Why would they care at that point about any of those pathetically trivial things that makes human lose sleep? So again, I'd say The creators who claim they're creating a Xian Xia fantasy drama never even bothered to consider things from this perspective. Obviously, to be a story that will be appreciated by us, it still has to have a human element. But it's not an excuse to stop you from running wild with imagination. At the end of the day, I'm just a reviewer. I currently do not really have any power or influence of the drama land. Certainly impossible to take part in any of this type of projects, but never say never. Maybe one day I'll be able to get my hand on some actual projects. But before that, all I can say is many such dramas that I've talked about today that have so many problems are gonna continually get made. But I hope somewhere out there are still people who are working on these type of projects, have the ambition, have the urge to break through the cycle of same story, repeating it over and over again. And also they're lucky enough to have the opportunity to get it actualized and made. At the end of the day, Xian Xia dramas are just one particular type of screen storytelling. Things are only as important as each and every one of us makes them to be. These are the thoughts I have on the current situation of Chinese Xian Xia dramas. I really appreciate my audiences being able to sit through this video. I'll see you in my next video. Meanwhile, live long and happy drama watching.
这玩意儿拍了2个多小时啊，就离谱。